Story 1. I was out of options. Rent was overdue, the eviction notice was taped to my door like a scarlet letter, and my fridge held nothing but half a bottle of ketchup and a takeout container I was too afraid to open. I'd stopped answering calls weeks ago. There were only so many ways to say, "I'll pay you next Friday," when Friday had stopped showing up for you. Every night I sat in front of my laptop until my eyes burned, scrolling through job sites that blurred together into one long rejection letter. Experience required, degree preferred, must be willing to smile while dying inside. No one hires someone whose only resume entry is desperate. That's when I saw it. It wasn't even online. I was walking home from the grocery store empty-handed because even ramen felt like a luxury, and I noticed a flyer taped to the bus stop shelter. It was printed on plain white paper, the kind you'd pull from a dusty office printer. Black letters, no logo, no company name. Sell your time. Competitive rates, no experience necessary. I laughed, out loud to no one. A scam, obviously. Some shady gig that ends with your kidneys on the dark web. But the thing stuck in my head the entire walk home, like an earworm. Sell your time. The words were too simple, too confident, like whoever wrote them didn't care if you believed or not. By the time I reached my apartment, curiosity had started wrestling with hopelessness. What if it wasn't a scam? What if it was just weird? Weird was better than starving. The email was printed in tiny letters at the bottom of the page. I typed it in, hit send, and told myself it was just a joke. They replied before I even finished making coffee. The message was short. "Thank you for your interest in Chronocorp. Orientation available tomorrow, 9 o'clock a.m. No documentation required. Please arrive on time." No address signature, no phone number, just a street name I'd never heard of, and those last two words, on time. The next morning I went. I don't even remember deciding to. I just remember standing in front of a building that looked too clean to exist in my part of town. Chronocorp. The name was printed in thin silver letters above the glass doors. No slogan, no logo. Inside, the air smelled like nothing, the sterile, filtered kind of nothing that only money can afford. Everything gleamed white, the floors, the walls, even the furniture. The only color came from the clocks. There were so many clocks. Dozens of them lined the walls, each one a little different. Antique brass, digital displays, wristwatches in glass cases, but all ticking in perfect, synchronized rhythm, not a single second out of place. The sound was hypnotic, soft but endless. Tick, tick, tick. The receptionist sat behind a white counter that looked like it had never known dust. Her hair was neatly pinned back, her uniform spotless, her expression off, like a smile worn thin from too much practice. "Thank you for your interest in Chronocorp," she said, every syllable smooth and balanced. "We value every second." I told her I didn't have a resume. She didn't blink. "We won't need that." She slid a clipboard toward me. The paper was thick and heavy, the kind you'd use for wedding invitations. It wasn't a job application. There was no section for previous employment or emergency contact. Just a handful of lines filled with legal jargon that might as well have been written in another language. The only part in bold, centered in the middle of the page, read, "Time exchanged." There was a line for a signature underneath. I hesitated, glancing up to ask a question, but the receptionist wasn't looking at me anymore. Her gaze was fixed on the largest clock on the wall, a massive black and gold thing that ticked with mechanical precision. For a moment I thought the sound of it got louder, like the air itself was keeping time. Tick, tick, tick. "Do I need to?" I started, but she cut me off gently. "Just sign and we'll take care of the rest." Her tone was kind, too kind, like someone comforting a child before a vaccination. My stomach twisted, but the word paycheck echoed in my head louder than the ticking. I signed. She smiled, not warmly, but with a kind of satisfaction that made my chest tighten. Then she reached for a small silver stopwatch on the counter, pressed it once, and said softly, "Your time begins now." The ticking in the room seemed to falter for a single beat. Just one. Then everything went perfectly, eerily back to rhythm. The job turned out to be easy. Too easy. A man in a grey suit met me in the lobby the next morning. He didn't smile, didn't introduce himself, just turned on his heel and motioned for me to follow. His shoes made no sound on the tile. Mine did. That was the first thing that felt wrong. It was like the building only chose to echo for me. The hallways stretched longer than they should have. Clean. Too clean. White walls, chrome trim, soft white lights that never flickered, and clocks everywhere. Wall clocks, desk clocks, floor clocks, all ticking together in a perfect synchronized rhythm. The sound should have been comforting, but it wasn't. It reminded me of breathing, 1, 2, 3, and I couldn't tell if it was mine or the building's. We passed door after door, each labeled donation room followed by a number. I tried to count them, but somewhere between 6 and 9, I lost track. The numbers didn't make sense. We turned corners that didn't seem to exist in the building's floor plan I'd seen online. Finally, he stopped at donation room 7. The door opened with a soft click, and he motioned me inside. The room was small, barely big enough for the chair in the center and the machine beside it. The machine looked old, older than the building itself. Heavy brass panels, faint scratches on its surface, the kind of hum you feel more than hear. Wires coiled out from its sides like veins, ending in silver discs the size of coins. A dial on the front read, "Hours donated, so." "Please sit," the man said. His voice was quiet, smooth, practiced. I obeyed, mostly out of habit, out of hunger. The discs against my temples were cold enough to make me flinch. The metal smelled faintly like ozone, like lightning before a storm. "You may feel a brief acceleration," he said. "That's normal." Acceleration. I opened my mouth to ask what that meant, but before I could speak, the hum deepened. It wasn't loud, more like a pressure behind my eyes. My heartbeat started matching it, or maybe it was the other way around. Then it stopped. The man was already removing the discs. His movements were calm, deliberate, unbothered. The wall clock said an hour had passed. My phone said the same, but I hadn't felt it. Not a second of it. My body felt rested, lighter, like I'd been asleep but better. My hunger was gone, replaced by this strange clarity, like my brain had been polished. The man handed me a slip of paper, $4.80. "Payment is automatic," he said. "You'll receive it instantly." He was right. By the time I checked my phone, the deposit was already there. No delay, no pending transaction, just done. The second session went the same, so did the third. Each visit I'd sit, feel the hum, blink, and time would vanish. No dizziness, no side effects, just missing hours and a bigger balance in my account. Other employees drifted through the hallways like ghosts in pressed uniforms. They didn't talk much. They didn't look much either. Sometimes I'd pass someone I swore I'd seen before, only their face would seem slightly off, not in a big way, just subtly rearranged, like they were the same person, but through a fogged mirror. Once I stopped by the vending machine on my way out and saw a woman staring at it, hand hovering over the keypad, motionless. Her reflection in the metal looked sharper than her actual face. "What does it do?" I asked, nodding toward her door. She blinked slowly, then smiled without looking up. "Don't overthink it," she said. "Just enjoy the paychecks." And I did. The money felt unreal at first, too much, too easy. But after a few sessions, I stopped questioning it. Bills disappeared, the fridge filled up. I bought a new mattress, decent headphones, even a proper coat for the first time in years. I slept through the night without the usual dread gnawing at me. For a while, it felt like maybe this was what stability looked like. But little things started bothering me. The clocks, for one, they ticked in perfect unison. At work, at home, even on my phone. I'd lie in bed sometimes and hear it under the silence. Soft, steady, everywhere. And the seconds, they'd skip. Not randomly, but rhythmically, like something was cutting out the empty space between ticks. Sometimes my phone would jump from 10:42:06 to 10:42:08, cleanly, like the world had blinked and moved on without me. I told myself it was nothing, just a glitch. But some mornings I'd wake up and my phone's alarm would already be ringing, even though I hadn't set it. I'd check the call log and see a number labeled Chronocorp HQ, listed at times I didn't remember being awake. And every night, just before I drifted off, I'd feel that faint hum behind my temples again. It wasn't loud enough to scare me, just loud enough to remind me it was still there. Counting. The first thing I lost was a meal. Nothing major, just dinner. I came home one night, dropped my keys on the counter, and saw an empty plate in the sink. Grease streaks, crumbs, a fork balanced across it. Only, I hadn't cooked, I hadn't eaten. I stood there staring at the plate longer than I care to admit, waiting for some memory to click into place. It didn't. The smell of garlic still lingered in the air, faint but fresh. I checked my phone. A text from my friend Mia. "That pasta was good. You should cook more often." My thumb hovered over the screen. I hadn't seen her in weeks. I started to type back, something like "what pasta," but before I finished, the typing bubbles appeared on her end, then froze, then disappeared. The timestamp on her message read "yesterday." I stared at that word until the phone went dark. After that, it wasn't just dinner. I'd open my fridge and find groceries I didn't remember buying, fresh fruit, cold cuts, a bottle of wine that definitely hadn't been there the day before. Once I found a grocery receipt in my jacket pocket, signed in my handwriting, with a timestamp for 2:13 a.m. Sometimes I'd wake up and my laundry was folded neatly in the basket. Once my sheets were changed. I don't even own spare sheets. For a while I blamed stress, or maybe the sessions at Chronocorp were messing with my sleep schedule. Maybe donating hours confused my body clock. It was the only explanation that didn't make me sound insane. But it wasn't just me. One morning the clocks in my apartment stopped, every single one digital analog wall phone for exactly 1 second. Then, without a sound, they all caught up in perfect unison. I stood there holding my breath, listening to the faint tick that seemed to crawl under everything. The fridge hum, the traffic outside, even my heartbeat, everything was syncing to that rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. It wasn't loud, it didn't need to be, it was constant. Then came the bruises. Small, circular ones on my arms and neck, not painful, just there, the size of a coin. I tried to remember bumping into something, but the harder I tried, the more my memories slipped away like water between fingers. Some mornings there'd be new marks, faint scratches along my ribs, little red indentations on my temples where the discs used to sit. At work, no one mentioned them. The man in the grey suit still met me in the lobby, still walked me wordlessly to donation room 7. Same chair, same hum, same slip of paper with a new number. Only the machine was different this time. The dial didn't start at 0. It already read 300 when I sat down. I frowned. Why does it say that? The man's expression didn't change, but his eyes seemed distant, like he was reading off a script written behind my head. "It accounts for carryover," he said. "Carryover of what?" He smiled. It was the kind of smile people practice in mirrors, all muscle, no meaning. "Time isn't lost," he said softly. "It's redistributed." Before I could respond, the hum began. This time I felt it deeper, not in my head, in my bones. The air thickened, my vision tunneled. When it stopped, I didn't feel lighter. I felt stretched, like part of me hadn't caught up yet, like I'd stood up too fast and left something behind. That night I couldn't sleep. The hum seemed to follow me home, whispering in the stillness. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw numbers flickering behind my eyelids, 300, 425, 600, like my dreams were clocking in. The next morning, Mia called me. I almost didn't answer. When I finally did, her voice was trembling. "Hey," she said, "are you okay?" "I'm fine, why?" "You don't remember, do you?" "Remember what?" Silence, long, unsteady. Then, "You were at my place last night. You brought wine. You told me you quit your job." My chest went tight. "No, I didn't." Her breath hitched. "You did. You were different. You looked happy, but your eyes..." "What about them?" Another pause, then quietly, "They weren't yours." I didn't know what to say. I think I hung up without meaning to. That night I didn't sleep, couldn't. The hum was louder now, steady, pulsing behind my eyes like a second heartbeat. The clocks in my room ticked out of sync for the first time since I'd started at Chronocorp. Then one by one they corrected themselves, except my wristwatch. It was still ticking a second too fast. When I tried to reset it, the second hand pushed back. Not jammed, not broken, pushing back, like something inside was fighting to keep going. I stopped going in for a week. No calls, no emails, no one from Chronocorp showed up at my door. At first I thought maybe they'd forgotten about me, then the direct deposits kept coming. Every Friday, same time, same amount, even though I hadn't clocked in. That's what broke me. It wasn't guilt, it was curiosity. If they didn't need me to show up, then where the hell was my time coming from? I decided to go back, not to work, but to find out who was signing my life away. Chronocorp's lobby looked different that morning. Brighter somehow. Polished. The walls gleamed with that false hospital white sheen that only fluorescent light can make. The air was sterile, humming softly with the sound of electricity, or maybe time itself. And the clocks. They were everywhere. But this time every single one showed the same thing, 12 o'clock. Hundreds of them ticking in unison, yet somehow perfectly silent. The receptionist smiled when she saw me. Mr. Hale, she said, her voice syrup smooth. I froze. My name isn't... She tilted her head, still smiling. It will be. She slid a visitor badge across the desk. I looked down. It didn't say visitor. It said, Donor 27, expired access. Something inside me twisted. I didn't correct her. I just took the badge and walked past before she could stop me. The hallways were quieter than usual, but I could feel movement through the walls, machines breathing, wires pulsing. The floors vibrated faintly under my shoes, like the building had a heartbeat. I passed room after room, glass walls revealing rows of people slumped in the same reclining chairs I'd used, discs on their temples. The machines beside them pulsed with faint blue light. Most were motionless, some twitched. Their eyes fluttered beneath closed lids, as if they were dreaming someone else's dream. I reached the end of the corridor. A locked glass door read, Client access, authorized personnel only. I swiped my badge just to try. The lock clicked open. Inside was colder. The temperature dropped a few degrees instantly, and my breath fogged the glass. Rows of monitors filled the room, hundreds of screens showing live feeds of people, all ordinary moments. A man eating dinner, a woman brushing her hair, a child playing with a dog. All of them happy. None of them noticed the cameras. Then one screen caught my eye. The feed showed me. I was in a restaurant I didn't recognize, wearing a suit I didn't own, drinking wine I couldn't afford. Across from me sat a woman, older, elegant, poised in a way money teaches. She was smiling, calm, as if she'd known me forever. A label flashed at the corner of the feed. Client, Adela Hale. Purchased hours, 268. 268 hours. 11 days. That's how much of me she owned. I clicked into the file. Notes appeared. Excellent physical compatibility, responsive body control, requests recurring sessions. Remaining balance 2 years, 11 months, 4 days. My mouth went dry. I hadn't sold that much. You're not supposed to be here. The voice came from behind me. The man in the grey suit, same one from the first day, only now his face looked thinner, like someone had scraped the human off him and left something hollow underneath. She likes your body, he said, calm as ever. Says it's easy to move in. I turned on him. I didn't agree to this. He shrugged almost kindly. You signed the contract. You didn't specify the limit. That's what happens when you sell time in bulk. I laughed, sharp and ugly. Then I want it back. He tilted his head, watching me the way a clock might watch a second hand. You can't take back what's already spent. My hands shook. I grabbed the monitor, yanking it sideways. Where is she? He looked up, eyes flicking toward the clock above the door. Not here, he said. She's in there. The clock read 12 o'clock. It didn't move. Then something cracked inside my skull, like the sound of glass shattering underwater. The air folded inward. I was standing in the restaurant. Same table, same wine. Adela Hale sat across from me, smiling my own smile. Hello, darling, she said. And it was my voice. I stumbled back. Get out of me! She chuckled softly. You gave me this. You didn't want the time. I simply made better use of it. The restaurant froze mid-motion. Waiters paused mid-step, wine mid-pour, laughter suspended in the air like a photo. The light flickered, but it wasn't dimming. It was hesitating. When I looked down, my hands weren't sinking. One lagged behind the other, like my body couldn't decide what second it belonged to. She stood, lifting her glass with perfect grace. You shouldn't have come back, she said. You're making a mess of the schedule. The walls bent inward. The air shimmered, bending sound and shape together. I could hear the hum again, the same low vibration from the donation room, only now it filled every inch of me. My bones vibrated with it. Stop, I whispered. She smiled wider. It's already stopped. And she was right. Everything was motionless except her and me. Then I realized she wasn't really moving either. She was replaying seconds ahead of me, like I was watching her future through a glass wall I couldn't reach. Time, she whispered, her voice overlapping itself like echoes in a tunnel. Doesn't belong to anyone. It just waits for someone desperate enough to sell it. I blinked and she was gone. So was the restaurant. I was back in donation room 7. Empty chair, cold air, the hum fading into silence. Only the clock on the wall remained. Still ticking, 1 second too fast. I reached for it, desperate to stop the sound, to prove I still existed. My hand passed straight through. The hum cut out. Everything stopped. For a heartbeat, I thought that was peace. Then I realized it wasn't silence. It was the sound of something waiting to start again. I woke up to the hum again. Familiar but distant. Not my own heartbeat this time. It was someone else's, pulsing inside me in a rhythm I couldn't claim. The chair beneath me was cold. Donation room 7, same walls, same ceiling, same hum trembling faintly through the air like a held breath, like the room itself was waiting for me to remember. A slip of paper lay on the counter. My handwriting, only the number was different. Ton 200. I didn't remember doing it. The receptionist smiled when I stumbled out, perfect, practiced, empty, like her face was drawn onto glass. "Thank you for your service," she said. I don't... My voice cracked. The words felt foreign, like I was trying to speak through static, like someone else was borrowing my mouth to answer for me. Her eyes flicked toward the clock above the door. It wasn't ticking. Or maybe it was, but the seconds weren't mine anymore. "Your time begins now," she whispered. I turned toward the mirror. It wasn't me. Not entirely. The face staring back belonged to someone else, wearing my eyes like borrowed glass, my hair, my skin, my hands, but hollow. A mask I had worn for someone else's comfort. Its smile twitched half a beat too late. The hum grew louder, not just the machine, the walls, the air, the space between my ribs. Every breath vibrated like it was running on borrowed seconds. Every heartbeat felt leased, out of sync with my chest. I tried to speak. My mouth moved. The words weren't mine. I tried to move. My body responded halfway, awkwardly, uncertainly, a marionette with tangled strings, limbs jerking just off time. Then the screen in front of me flickered on. Another me appeared, sitting in an office I didn't recognize, smiling at a client I didn't know. Hours I'd never lived, memories I'd never made, playing back in real time like a recording, except the recording was my body. In one feed I was laughing, in another I was crying, in one I was holding a child, in another a knife. All of it me, none of it mine. I realized with a sick clarity. I wasn't gone, not yet, but I was someone else's property now. The receptionist reached for the stopwatch, pressed it once. "Your hour has been sold," she said softly. "Enjoy the rest of your life, if you can call it that." The world wavered. The hum became a single stretched note that filled everything. Every second I'd counted as mine slipped through my fingers like sand, leaving only the rhythm of something still ticking, somewhere far away. I tried to scream. The sound that came out was mine, and yet not. I tried to remember who I was. Nothing, just a lingering echo of borrowed time. Then nothing. No pain, no sound, just a faint, eternal ticking, waiting for the next desperate soul. I thought, maybe this is what eternity feels like. And then I was gone. Story 2. How old must he be now? 8, 9? I stared at my neighbor, unsure what she was asking. She read the confusion on my face. "Your cute little guy. I saw him biking down the lane earlier. He must be old enough for grade 4 now, right?" Mrs. Babbage was a bit on the older side, but I never thought she had shown signs of dementia. Not until now. I wasn't exactly sure what to say. She proceeded to stare at me, tilting her head, as if I was the one misremembering. I awkwardly opened my mouth. "Oh, right, my little guy." She brightened. "Yes, he must be in grade 4, right?" "Sure, yes, he is." "What a cute little guy," she said, and returned to watering her flowers. It was an odd, slightly sad moment. I wondered if her husband had seen glimmers of this too. I could only hope that this was a momentary blip, and not the sign of anything Alzheimer's related. I took the rest of my groceries out of my car and entered home. I had a long day of teaching, and I just wanted to sit back, unwind, and watch something light on TV. But as soon as I took off my first shoe, I smelled it, something burning on the stove. Something burning with lots of cheese on it. The hell? I dashed over to the kitchen and almost fell down, partially because I was wearing only one shoe, but also because there was a scrawny little boy frying Kraft dinner. I let out a half scream. But very quickly I composed myself into the same assertive adult who taught at a university. "What? Excuse me, who are you? What are you doing here?" The boy's blonde, willow-like hair whipped around his face as he looked at me with equal surprise. "Papa, what do you mean? I'm here." He was a scared, confused child, and I couldn't quite place the bizarre inflection of his words. "Do you want some KD, Papa? Have some. Was that a Russian accent? It took me a second to realize he was wearing an oversized shirt that looked just like mine. Was he wearing my clothes? I held out my palms like I would at a lecture, my standard everyone settle down gesture, and cleared my throat. I'm sorry, I don't know who you are or what this is. The boy widened his eyes, still frightened by my intensity. He stirred the food with a wooden spoon. It's KD Papa, your favorite, chili cheese kind, don't you remember? Ah. His name was Dmitri, and he claimed to be my son. Apparently at some point there had been a mother, but he didn't remember much about her. He only remembered me. You've been Papa my whole life, Papa. I tried having a sit-down conversation. In fact, I tried to have many sit-down conversations where I explained to Dmitri that that would be impossible. But it always ended with him clutching me with impassioned tears, begging me to remember him. The confusion only got worse when my mother called. "How is my grandson doing?" she asked. I didn't know how to reply. The conversation grew awkward and tense until eventually I clarified my whole predicament. "Mom, what are you talking about? I don't have a son. I've never had a son." My mother gasped a little, then laughed and scolded me, saying I shouldn't joke around like that, because of course I've always had a son, a smart little guy who will be celebrating 9 this weekend. I hung up. I stood petrified in my own kitchen, staring at this strange, expectant Slavic child. For the next 10 minutes, all I could do was ask where his parents were, and he just continued to act frightened, like any authentic kid might, and replied with the same question, "How did you forget me, Papa?" My method wasn't getting me anywhere, so I decided to play along. I cleared my head with a shot of espresso. I told him my brain must have been scrambled from overworking, and I apologized for not remembering I was his father. He brightened immediately. "It's okay, Papa, it's okay." He gave me a hug. "You always work so hard." The tension dropped further as Dmitri finished making the noodles and served himself some. I politely declined and watched him eat. And he watched me watch him eat. "So you're okay now? You're not angry?" His accent was so odd. "No," I said, "I'm not angry. I was just a little scrambled." His eyes shimmered, looking more expectant. "So we can be normal now?" A wan chill trickled down my neck. I didn't really know what to say, but for whatever reason, I did not want to say, "Yes, we can be normal now," because this was not normal. Far from it. This child was not my son. He started playing with his food and quivered a little, like a worried mouse seeking reassurance. "Everything will be fine," I eventually said. "No need to stress. Enjoy your noodles." To my shock and dismay, I discovered that Dmitri also had his own room. My home office had somehow been replaced by a barren, clay-walled chamber filled with linen curtains, old wooden toys, and a simple bed. The smell of bread and earth wafted throughout. I watched him play with his blocks and spinning tops for about half an hour before he started to yawn and say he wanted to go to sleep. It was the strangest thing tucking him in. He didn't want to switch to pajamas or anything. He just sort of hopped into his straw bed and asked me to hold his hand. Dimitri's fingers were cold, slightly clammy little things. It was very bizarre, comforting him like my own son, but it appeared to work. He softened and lay still. He didn't ask for any lullaby or bedtime story. He just wanted to hold my hand for a minute. "Thank you, Papa. I'm so glad you're here. So glad you can be my Papa. Good night." I inched my way out of the room and watched him through the crack of his door. At about 9:30, he gave small, childlike snores. He had fallen asleep. There. Cautiously, I called Pat, my co-worker with whom I shared close contact. She had the same reaction as my mother. "Harlan, of course you have a son. From your marriage to Svetlana." "My marriage to who?" "You met her in Moscow, when you were touring Europe." It was true that I had guest lectured 15 years ago across the UK, Germany and Russia. I was awarded a grant for it, but I only stayed in Moscow for 3 days. "I never met anyone named Svetlana." "Don't be weird, Harlan, come on." Pat's conviction was very disturbing. "You and Svetlana were together for many years." "We were? How many?" "Look, I know the divorce was hard, but you shouldn't pretend your ex-wife doesn't exist." "I'm not pretending, I'm being serious. I don't remember her." "Then get some sleep." I sipped on my second espresso of the night, but I have slept. I'm fine. "Well then, I don't get what this joke is. Knock it off, it's creepy." "I'm not joking." "I'll see you tomorrow for the birthday." "Birthday?" "Yes, your son's birthday. Jesus Christ. Good night, Harlan. Get some sleep." "There." I didn't sleep that night. My efforts were spent scouring the filing cabinets and drawers throughout my house. I had credit card bills covering school supplies, kids' clothing shops, and costlier groceries. I even had pictures of Dimitri hung around the walls from various ages. It's like everything was conforming to this new reality. The harder I looked for clues to disprove my fatherhood, the more evidence I found confirming it. It was Dimitri who woke me up off the living room couch and said Uncle Boris was here. Uncle Boris? I peeked through the window and could see a very large blonde man smiling back at me. Behind him was a gaggle of other relatives, all speaking Russian to each other. "Hello, Harlan." The blonde man's voice penetrated past the glass. "We are here for Thursday." They all looked excited and motioned to the front door. They were all wearing tunics and leggings, traditional birthday clothes or something. I was completely floored. I didn't know what to do, so I just sort of nodded and subtly slinked back into my kitchen. Dimitri came to pull at my arm. "Come on, Papa, we have to let them in." "I don't know any of them." "Yes, you do, Papa. It's Uncle Boris. It's Uncle Boris." I yanked my hand away. It was one thing to pretend I was this kid's dad for a night. It was quite another to let a group of strangers into my house first thing in the morning. Dimitri frowned. "I'll open the door." "Wait, hold on." I grabbed Dimitri's shoulder. He turned away. "Let go!" I tried to pull him back, but then he dragged me into the living room again. Our struggle was on display for everyone outside. Boris looked at me with saucer eyes. Dimitri pulled harder, and I had no choice but to pull harder back. The boy hit his head on a table as he fell. Boris yelled something in Russian. Someone else hollered back. I heard hands trying to wrench open my door. "Dimitri, stop," I said. "Let's just take a minute to—" "You're hurting me, Papa. Oi!" My front door unlocked. Footsteps barreled inside. I let go of my son and watched 3 large Slavic men enter my house with stern expressions. Dimitri hid behind them. "Is everything okay?" Boris peered down at me through his tangle of blonde hair. "Yes, sorry," I said, struggling to find words. "I'm just very confused." "Confused? Why were you hitting Dimitri?" The little boy pulled on his uncle's arm and whispered something into his ear. Boris's expression furrowed, but before I could speak further, a slender pair of arms pushed aside all the male figures and revealed a woman with unwavering, bloodshot eyes. Something in me knew it was her. Svetlana. She wore a draped brown sheet as a dress, with skin so pale I could practically see her sinews and bones. It's like she had some extreme form of albinism. "Harlan," she said, somehow breaking my name into 3 syllables. "Harlan!" I've never been so instinctively afraid of a person in my life. It's like she had weaved herself out of the darkest edges of memory. I saw flashes of her holding my waist in Moscow outside Red Square. Flashes of her lips whispering chants in the shadows of St. Basil's Cathedral. Svetlana held Dimitri's shoulder, then looked up at me. "Just tell him it will be normal. Tell him everything will be normal." "No, this is not happening. None of this is real." Barefoot and still wearing the same clothes as yesterday, I bolted out the back of my house and hurtled towards my driveway. Before the rest of my new family could realize what was going on, I hopped into my Subaru and stepped on the gas. As I drove away from my house, I looked back into my rearview mirror, and I swear it didn't look like my house at all. I swear it looked like a thatched roof hut. Back at the university, I walled myself up in my study. I cancelled all speaking arrangements for the next week, saying I needed a few personal days. Wow. No one in my department knew I had a son. Nothing in my study indicated I had an extended Russian family. When I asked Pat about our phone conversation last night, her response was, "What conversation?" My mum said the same thing. With immense trepidation, I returned to my house the following day, and after setting foot back inside, I knew that everything had reverted back to the way it was before. No more framed pictures of Dimitri. No more alarming photo albums. And that clay-walled room where Dimitri spun tops and slept inside, it was just my home office again. To this day, I still have no clue what happened during that bizarre September weekend. But doing some of my own research, I'm starting to think I did encounter something in Moscow all those years ago, some kind of lingering old curse, or a stray spirit, or a Chernaya Vedma, a black witch disguised as an ordinary woman. Although I haven't seen any evil things bubble up around my place since, every now and then I do have a conversation with Mrs. Babbage, and she seems to remember my son very well. Such a cute little guy, always waving hello. Did you know he offered me food once? I think it was Kraft dinner. Story 3. There really is no better way to say it. I came very close to summoning a demon, thanks to my hobby. This disastrous hobby happened to be antique collecting. Yep. Who knew shopping for old coins and jewelry caskets could be so life-threatening? Well, for 10+ years it wasn't. Then, last month, I was just looking around yard sales and antique stores in my city, as I usually do when I get paid and have a day or two off work. There's a few places near my house that I frequent, and I'm on a first-name basis with the staff in each of them. Sounds quite sad, but believe it or not, it's a fulfilling hobby. I tend to look for metalwork, coins, silverware, knives, stuff like that. Within a couple years of buying from sales and visiting local auctions, I managed to mostly fill my basement with shelves and tabletops with plenty of specimens. I didn't really have a plan for what to do with them. I guessed I would start selling them on at some point when I ran out of room, but I still had some space in the basement, so I wasn't stopping just yet. One day, I stopped by one of my local antique stores and started with the usual small talk with the lady working the counter. I asked if she had anything new in recently. She did. First, she showed me over to a display case full of old pocket watches. She pointed out the newest one, which I gave a quick look, then a polite nod as she moved on to the next thing. Clockwork wasn't really for me. The lady took me to a different room, where I found plenty of new pieces. Some silver goblets, cutlery sets, bracelets, brooches, and some rusty arrowheads and bullet casings that some metal detectorist must have dug up in a field somewhere. On a normal day, I would have jumped at the opportunity to buy half of her stock and blow half of my wage for that month, but on that particular day I just wasn't feeling any of it. When I told her, she was a little puzzled. She knew me, and she also knew that I loved stuff like this. She stood for a moment thinking. Then, her eyes squinted and a smirk curled her mouth. "Follow me." I did. She led me behind her counter and into the back room, where she kept tons of stuff she didn't have the space to put out on display. Loads of interesting things caught my eye, and lots of metalware, but none of it kept my attention for long. The lady reached high up on a shelf and pulled out a black box, a little larger than a book. My attention was immediately and intensely fixated on this object. She placed it on a countertop and pulled the lid off. In the black box, a knife was revealed. It was beautiful and ornate, with a gold handle and red gemstones worked into it. I had never seen anything so captivating. The lady said, "I kept this back here for you. I figured you would want to see it." Until she spoke, I had forgotten that I was in an antique shop. None of the metal, silver, gold, copper, or bronze pieces around me mattered anymore. All that mattered was this knife. I bought it on the spot. Looking back now, I was out of character, but at that moment, I felt like I hit the jackpot. I rushed home in my car and flew downstairs to the basement, where I picked out a nice spot for the blade on its own shelf. It wasn't as expensive as I was expecting, since the store clerk marked the price down a bit when she saw how enthusiastic I was about it. I'm sure she was just trying to help me out. Or maybe she felt just as compelled to sell it to me as I was to buy it from her. A couple days went by and I didn't think much about the knife. By the third or fourth day after buying it, however, I felt the urge to buy again. Of course, that was perfectly normal for me, especially after finding something so amazing. I went to another store the next day and started looking around. I didn't really go to this specific store very often, maybe once every 6 or 7 months. It was in a dingy area and was right next to a liquor store that tended to attract undesirables. But, for some reason, I felt like going there that day. The clerk had a very nice collection. A brilliant metal lampshade from the 70s, a couple good-looking Civil War revolvers, a weird little chess set made of titanium, all very cool, but nothing I felt like buying. I went up to the guy at the desk, who was arranging some old coins in his gloved hands. He saw me approach and put the coins down with a smile. Then, I asked the question, "Anything new in recently?" He thought for a second before responding, "Well, most of the new stuff's already out in the cases. Couple Victorian lockboxes, few medals from the Second World War over there." I was about to thank him and walk away when he stopped me with another string of words. "But I do have this one thing. Came in yesterday. Just haven't had a chance to price it yet. Come with me." I followed him upstairs into a storeroom full of stacked boxes and scattered trinkets of all varieties. As soon as he fished a small, pale wooden box out of one pile, I felt the same fixation as I had felt with the knife. He opened it to reveal a dainty necklace with a shimmering silver chain, haphazardly strewn within the box. I wanted it. He was more than willing to haggle for a price. When it was settled, I walked out, got in my car and drove home to place the new pale box right beside the black box of the knife. A couple days later, the shelf collapsed. The 2 boxes fell to the concrete basement floor and splintered into pieces. When I eventually came down and found what had happened, the knife and necklace were out of their boxes and loose on the floor. I had no spare boxes or containers on hand to put them in until I could buy new ones, so I simply placed the items on the table by the wall. The plan was to buy new boxes for them and return them to the shelves, but I got distracted halfway through ordering them and I never ended up getting any. The fact is, they made me forget. They wanted to be out in the open. Instead of buying new boxes, I went online for more locations where I might find more things to buy. Things started getting a little strange in my house at that point. Doors slamming and picture frames falling from walls. I just chalked it up to a strong breeze and bad hanging nails. Over the next week and a half, I bought another 2 items, a gold ring and a medieval European coin, both equally beautiful must-haves. After buying each one, I placed them all on the table in the basement, beside the necklace and knife. I took the new items out of their boxes, since they all looked so nice together in the open. I couldn't help but think to myself how much nicer they would look with one more item to complete the collection, except I didn't know what the last item would be, or what kind of mismatched collection I was assembling. That night, as I lay in bed, I saw someone in my house. At first, I thought I saw a dark stain on the wall, long and slender. I thought to myself how I had never noticed it. Was it mold, ripped wallpaper? Then I saw a human shadow cast against the wall, and I thought my jacket, hung on its hook, was catching the moonlight through the window. Then my eyes focused, and I saw the dark figure standing in my doorway. I lay in bed, paralyzed, unable to move as the dark thing looked at me with eyes it didn't have, before receding from view without sound. When it was gone, I slowly found feeling in my limbs again, but I still didn't move. I stayed there all night, watching the door, waiting for that shadowy person to return. It didn't. I was so willing to disprove what I had seen with my own eyes that I managed to convince myself that it was sleep paralysis. I mean, it basically was, except for the fact that I knew it wasn't. I just wasn't prepared to admit it. That same morning, I went online and looked for another antique store. I was presented with a list of places all within 10 miles of my house. I picked one at random and drove there. Clearly it wasn't random. Clearly I was meant to go there. When I arrived, the old man at the counter saw me and greeted me. He pointed out how tired I looked, with my dark, baggy eyes. I said I hadn't slept. Done with the small talk, I asked if he had anything new in stock. Yeah, I've got a couple things in the back. I followed him. When he opened a drawer and lifted a book out of it, I found myself short of breath, wanting nothing more than to buy the book. The man started talking about the brown, dusty book in his hands, and I was surprised he knew anything about it. The other 4 items I had bought had hardly any historical information known about them. I listened as he spoke. This book is apparently one of one, never mass-produced, never even copied, apparently. This is the only one of its kind. Now I thought he was just trying to upsell it to me, or give himself an excuse to charge an extortionate price. He carried on. The text is in a dead language somewhere between Russian and Latin, so no one has managed to translate it. I was losing interest by this point, not taking my eyes off the book in his hands. It's apparently haunted, you know. Excuse me, that's the very last thing I expected to hear. Yeah, some say it's imbued with a demonic presence. I got it looked at by a spiritualist a couple of years ago who agreed. They said that it's a totem that belonged to a cult. His words were starting to blur together. My breathing was quickening and my blood raced the longer I stood looking at the book, the longer that book wasn't in my hands. Any sane person would have walked out as soon as he mentioned the cult. I, on the other hand, asked for a price and bought the book. As I was walking out of the place, I stopped and turned back to the clerk. You mentioned a spiritualist before. Are they nearby? Sure enough, she was a few doors down. Here's what she told me. The book I had just bought was supposedly imbued with the soul of a demon. Well, one part of its soul, 1/5 to be specific. She told me about the historical accounts of the cults that worshipped the demon, and how it was fated to rise again once all 5 totems were collected from the ends of the earth and placed beside one another on an even ground. Somehow, these items had found their way to my local area over the years, and were now infiltrating my mind, influencing me to assemble them and, well, summon a demon. I left that place lightheaded. I drove home without thinking, barely breathing. When I pulled into my drive and turned off the engine, it was only then that I realized the gravity of what I had done. I had brought the book home. There was an intense feeling compelling me to bring the items together. to see them all beside one another on the table. To complete the collection, I had to fight that urge. I had to fight even harder to toss the book into the street. My stomach sank like a stone when the book hit the ground and its pages splayed open, fluttering in the breeze. That night I locked myself in my bedroom, dreading another visit from the shadowy man. Visit me, he did. He stood over me in the night as I lay still, unable to move, no matter how much I desperately tried. The phantom lifted its misty arm and brought it down on my shoulder. There was a sudden and intense pain, like a candle flame being held against my skin for longer than I could bear. I couldn't scream, so I just cried as I looked up at the thing. Its arm shot back and I bolted to my feet with the worst boiling pain I've ever felt. The figure was gone as I stood. When I checked my arm and shoulder in the mirror, I saw a giant red gash running with dark blood. By the time the sun rose in the sky, I had crudely patched up my arm with the few bandages I had in my first aid kit. I sat for a long time on my couch thinking about what to do. Eventually I called 911. I honestly don't know why. What could they possibly do? I guess I just needed some company while I suffered. I told them about the gnarly gash in my arm, and they said they'd bring some paramedics, which I wasn't at all opposed to. Then there was a knock at the door. I opened it to my neighbor. He held the book in his hands. "Hey, sorry to bother you. Is this yours? I think you might have dropped it on your way in." I had no idea what to say. I wanted to say no, but something in the back of my head, something down in the basement, told me to take it from him. "Yeah, thanks." "No problem, dude. Take care now." As I started to close the door, I felt so alone, but I wasn't. The phantom was back. It stood at the far end of the hall, watching me. It pointed to the basement door, between me and it. My mind raced. Could I make it to the oven? Could I burn the book? As this thought crossed my mind, the spectre took a step towards me, as if it knew what I was thinking and warned me not to try it. It pointed at the basement door again, and it opened, and I had an overwhelming desire to go down and see my collection finally completed. I took the first step without knowing it had been taken, my fingers still gripping the front door, which creaked open as I let go to take my second step. I was losing my grip on myself. Any ideas of rebelling were gone from my mind, as the rush of getting downstairs fueled me. I descended the steps, and was joined once more by the shadow when I reached the bottom, watching me from a corner of the room. I ignored it, focusing my full attention on the table with the coin, ring, necklace, and knife. The knife. I regained consciousness for a split second as a fleeting thought popped into my head, and, in that same instant, I felt a searing pain in my back. The phantom, now behind me, looming over me, clearly didn't like the idea of me killing myself with that knife. The pain intensified, flowing up and down my back in what I could only imagine as a giant wound running the length of my spine. My choice was die or summon a demon. I had no way of knowing what would happen to the totems after I died. I could only hope that someone would separate or destroy them. It wouldn't matter to me. At that moment, my mind was made. Now or never, I thought, swiping the knife off the table and stabbing it into my arm and slashing downwards. The pain got so intense that I couldn't stand up any longer, collapsing to my knees and then onto my side. The beating of blood in my ears grew louder as the pain swelled, then began to subside as I lost more blood. Then the table broke one of its legs, collapsing to the floor and casting the cursed antiques across the ground around me. The totems were together, but according to the spiritualist, needed to be resting together on the same even surface for the demon to rise. The gold hilt of the knife sticking out of my wrist was already touching the ground, but I couldn't let the book do the same. I held it in my free hand, which was now being burned hot by the phantom, desperate to make me drop it to the floor. The shadow lost its humanoid form, becoming a cloud of vapor, filling the air with a black smoke that burned like fire across my entire body. Despair fell over me, chilling my blood as I began to picture my own death, lying in a pool of blood in a smoky basement, which was soon to be the birthplace of a demon. My eyes started to go as the totems lay soaking in a slowly expanding pool of my own blood. Every fiber of my being told me to drop the book and complete the collection. Then, from off in the distance, I felt vibrations through the house. They got closer, and I realized they were voices. The phantom gave one last sting of unimaginable agony concentrated in my hand as the paramedics got me up onto a stretcher and marched me upstairs. I still clutched the book in my hand as they got me outside, and as soon as I felt the cool air on my face, I blacked out. I came to my senses in a hospital bed. I felt dreadful. I had all kinds of lines and drips feeding into me, and a heart monitor to my side to let me know I was somehow still alive. I glanced down and saw that my hand was wrapped tight with bandages. In that second, I realized the book was no longer in it, and I frantically looked around for it. A nurse saw me struggling and asked me what was wrong. "Your book?" she said. "It's okay, sir. Your book is right there on your bed table." I turned and breathed a deep sigh of relief as I saw the book lying on the table beside a vase of flowers. The pages of the brown book were dark red with my dried blood. "Sorry, sir," the nurse continued. "I'm afraid we weren't able to save it from being soaked." I laughed at what she said. I laughed and cried. When I finally got out of the hospital some days later, I held the book in my hands. Even then, I felt the demon's grasp. I wanted to bring it home. My wounds stung with fresh pain, distant pain, like thin tendrils trying to wrap me up and pull me back to the basement. It was a dark evening when I got out, and from the other side of the hospital parking lot, I could see a couple of homeless guys huddled around a flaming bin, vying for warmth. I was cold too, I thought. I could use some warmth. I walked over, a task that felt like it took years, and when I eventually made it to the flaming bin, I threw the book in without a second thought. As it flew through the night air, I felt a dull, spiteful burning in my back, but once the book descended into the fire, the pain was gone. I stayed, watching for long enough to see the pages crinkle into black nothingness. Only then could I be sure it was done. I got home in the early hours. My door was closed, taped up by the police. I pulled it down and came in. As of writing this out, locked in my bedroom. There's no signs of the phantom. Tomorrow I'm planning on getting those blood-soaked antiques in a garbage bag and driving them to the sea. The police are probably going to have some questions for me, and I'm probably not going to have the answers they want to hear. I'm not sure what answers I'll give them. I'm not quite sure of anything anymore. All except for one thing, I need a new hobby. Story 4. He'd called me just over an hour ago, out of the blue, raving. He never normally called this late. I'd struggled to follow what he was saying, something about spiders and under his skin. It wasn't like him at all, and the way he abruptly hung up when I questioned him, I knew something was off. I waited again, wondering if maybe he'd heard me this time. He had to be in there. I could still hear the muffled echoes of his TV. I'd already tried calling several times. Something was wrong. After a few more minutes of standing there, waiting, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Retrieving the spare key from the plant pot on the front porch, I slid it into the lock. It popped open with an ominous click. Andy had left it there for emergencies, and this definitely felt like one. Slowly opening the door, I shouted his name, hoping for any sign of him. I didn't want him to think I was a stranger breaking in. The lights illuminated the hallway, just as inconspicuous as ever. Other than the sound of the TV further down the hall, there was silence. Gingerly closing the door behind me, my mind began whirling. I made my way deeper into his house, still calling his name. Again, nothing. The sounds of the TV grew louder as I approached the living room, rounding the door to reveal it playing away to itself. I was getting worried now. Where the hell was Andy? Stepping back out into the hallway, I decided to check the other rooms. Heading towards the kitchen, my jaw dropped, and the blood drained from my face. There he was. He was lying there on the kitchen floor, unmoving, his skin a mottled grey. Rushing over to him, I dropped to my knees. What had happened? Reaching out, I rolled him onto his back. Throwing my hand to my mouth, I tried my best to stifle my scream. Blood, so much blood. He was lying in a pool of it, slick and crimson. It looked like he'd clawed himself open. Tiny cuts covered one of his arms. They were slowly leaking, and a large patch of skin was missing from his shoulder, revealing the raw flesh beneath, like he'd tried to dig something out. The vast majority, however, seemed to have spilled from his open mouth. His jaw was hanging there, dangling at an angle I'd never thought possible. It looked as though it had been pushed out, forced away from the rest of his face, leaving nothing but a gaping hole. My stomach churned, and I had to turn away. Wrestling with the bile clawing up my throat, I stared at the ground beside him, trying to force his face from my mind. Slipping my phone from my pocket, I dialed the emergency services. Trying my best to fight back tears, I explained to the operator what had happened, how I'd found Andy. I couldn't bear to look at him. All I could do was stare at the floor. Through my blurred vision, though, I saw something. I could hear the operator trying to reassure me, telling me they'd have someone there as soon as they could, but her voice seemed to fade. merging into the silence in the background before cutting out. Without thinking, I'd hung up the call, my thumb seemingly moving on its own. I didn't even realize, transfixed by what I'd seen on the ground. Small, almost pock-like dots, a patterned series of them. They seemed to start from the pool of blood, tentatively spreading further and further away from it. They were about the size of a small coin, crimson and perfectly round. They followed one after the other, almost in sync, leading further into the kitchen. Following them with my eyes, I could see them heading off towards the back door. New thoughts whirled around as I got up, following their progress. What were they? Drops from Andy's arm? No, they were too uniform for that. Maybe droplets that flew as he fell? No, not with the distance they seemed to cover. They seemed to march steadily towards the back door before taking a sharp left turn and climbing up the cabinets. Unfazed by the change in elevation, they continued straight up before disappearing out of the open back window. What the hell was this? They seemed more like tracks. I shuddered as I tried to imagine what could have made them. Could it have done that to Andy? Whatever it was in the garden now, or at least it had gone that way. Resting my hand on the handle, I chastised myself. Did I really want to go out there? Andy was dead, and the police were on their way. I could just wait for them to get here, let them handle it. It was their job after all. But I needed to know what had happened to my friend. I needed to be sure. He would have done the same for me. He deserved more than this. Against my better judgment, I found myself opening the back door, stepping out onto the slabs of the patio. Sure enough, the prints continued out here too. They led deeper into the garden, heading towards the back. Slowly, I followed them, my breath shaking all the while. My head was on a swivel, looking for any sign of movement, anything hiding in the dark. Andy's garden backed out onto a patch of wasteland. It was overgrown and disused, but it was home to all sorts of things. He often had problems with foxes and badgers trying to get into his bins at night. Could he have tried to bring one inside, perhaps? No, those tracks didn't look like any kind of animal I'd seen before. The tracks came to a stop at the end of the garden, the slatted fence separating me from the wasteland only inches away. Before me was Andy's shed. Although it wasn't new, it was still in good condition. That's what made the hole at the bottom of the door stand out. It reached halfway up my shin, jagged shards of wood poking at odd angles around it, as though it had been freshly torn away. The tracks continued inside it, vanishing into the gloom. Whatever it was in there. Reaching out a shaking hand, I pulled the handle slowly, ready to jump out of the way if anything charged out at me. It stuck at first, resisting me, before slowly pulling away with an odd tearing noise. Stale, musty air filled my nostrils as my eyes strained against the gloom of the shed. I couldn't make out anything much in the darkness, but the trailing movement from the back of the door caught my eye. Gossamer fibers flowing in the breeze, frayed from thicker strands, stuck fast to the back of the door in heavy clumps. It looked like webbing, or at least that's the only thing I can liken it to. I'd never seen anything like it. At its thickest, it looked wider than my wrist, thicker than any spider web I've ever seen anyway. Grabbing my phone from my pocket, I flicked the torch on. As the pale cone of light banished a little of the gloom, I stifled a whimper. There were so many of them. The webs. They coated the inside, the thick strands intertwining, covering almost every free inch of space. Something inside of me screamed, begging me to run. Images of giant, hairy legs skittering across the thick webs filled my mind. But I couldn't look away. I could have sworn there was something there, near the back. Something stuck in the webbing, unmoving. Resisting the urge to run, I forced myself over the threshold, pushing away one of the sticky, thick strands. As soon as it made contact with my skin, fire erupted. Searing pain worked its way down my fingers, climbing further up my hand. I tried wiping it off with my sleeve, the burning slowly subsiding, but leaving an unpleasant tingle in its wake. Turning back to the shape again, I could see it slightly better from here. It was large and oval-shaped. From what I could make out in the torchlight, it was a huge clump of webbing, about 3 feet long. It was hanging there, suspended by several strands. As I moved the torchlight over it again, something reflected back at me from near its base. I tried to focus my eyes, lifting the torch high above my head for a better angle. Icy fingers clawed their way along my neck as I realized what it was. An eye! Protruding from the bottom of the mass of webbing, it shone wildly in the light. As I stared, I could make out the face that it belonged to. It was canine and orange, probably a fox, although I couldn't see enough to be sure. It was twisted into a rictus of pain, its cold, terrified eyes staring at me as it hung there, unmoving, in this cocoon of unnatural webbing. What kind of spider could do this to a fox? How big was this thing? The cocoon jerked, swinging side to side as though something had knocked it, catching me off guard. I fumbled my phone, my fingers refusing to work properly. The loud clatter as it fell to the ground echoed around the shed, its light now illuminating the ceiling. My heart raced as I watched the fox swinging in the air. There was something in here with it, with me. I needed to go. I needed to get out now. Reaching down to grab my phone, my hand came to a premature stop as I saw large, spindly legs slowly wrapping themselves around the cocoon. They were translucent. An odd, faint light, too dim to make out in the darkness, seemed to pulse through them. My heartbeat echoed in my ears as I watched them creeping over the fox, clambering onto the webbing before it. The webs closer to me. Instinctively, I slowly pulled my hand back. As though sensing my retreat, the rest of it burst from behind the fox, and that scream I'd been fighting so hard to hold back tore out of my throat. I scrambled to my feet, kicking my phone further into the shed in the process. That was no spider. It was huge. I turned and ran, my feet slamming hard against the slabs. From behind, I could hear the almost metallic tapping of its skittering legs against the stones. They echoed around the empty garden. A soft whizzing noise zipped past my right ear as a strand of thick webbing missed me by inches. I pushed harder, my lungs burning, my mind racing. I needed to get inside, get something between me and that scuttling monstrosity. Another strand sailed past me, closer this time. That thing was fast. I could hear it gaining on me. The back door was just up ahead, still open just like I'd left it. All I had to do was reach it, just a few more feet. Summoning all of my strength, I pushed my legs as hard as they would go. I'd almost reached the threshold, was almost to safety, when I felt something land on my back. It yanked hard, nearly knocking me off my feet. Turning, a thick strand of web had fastened itself between my shoulder blades. Another hard yank caused me to stumble back, my coat slipping down my arms. That thing was so strong I could barely fight it. Images of the cocooned fox filled my mind, its glassy eyes staring at me as I imagined what would happen if that thing caught me. Ripping my arms free of the coat, I threw myself over the threshold and turned, slamming the back door as hard as I could. Frantically flicking the locks, I pressed myself back up against it and waited. My chest was pounding, my heart threatening to burst at any moment. I was just starting to catch my breath when I saw the window out of the corner of my eye. It was still open. Racing over to it, I was half expecting to see those translucent legs reaching around it as I grabbed the handle, slamming it shut. I forced the handle till I heard the click of the lock. Through the clear glass, I could see the thing. It was still in the garden, moving in the murk. It looked like it was making its way back towards the shed. When the porch light hit it, my stomach dropped. A freshly cocooned bundle was dragging carelessly behind it. It was my coat, already webbed over. Nausea welled up, and I retched hard, watery bile coating my throat as the adrenaline that was coursing through me wore off. My legs felt like jelly, and I slumped down to the kitchen floor. I sat there shivering, cold sweat resting on my forehead, staring at Andy's body, imagining what that thing must have done to him. I've been sitting here for what feels like hours now, just waiting for that thing to come back. Every noise sets me on edge. I'm just waiting for it to find a way in somehow. My hand still hurts too. The tingling won't go away. It feels like it's roiling under my skin. Sometimes there's a sharp pain, like something clawing at my palm. If I look closely in the light, I can see the skin twitch, almost like something's there. I can hear the sirens in the distance now. I just hope that thing's gone.